everybody. It's Rob Seaver, Executive Director with Leeds Council. I'm bringing you this year's first podcast of 2021. That's awesome. I don't know how many of us thought we'd get through 2020. I know that I had some doubts, but I will tell you that we got through. Here we are starting a new year, and I wanted to start it off with a bang. Last year, because of a lot of events that happened that you saw in the media, we had the privilege of starting a new task force, which now is a subcommittee for Leeds Council, and that's our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force, which is now a subcommittee. And through that, I've met a lot of great individuals, great leaders. People had no idea was in the space, and it was amazing when I met Sean-Reed McGee for the first time. He had an instant charisma, something that most everybody was attracted to in the group, and he's been an outright leader. Him and Matt Tillman single-handedly have put this group together and have really done a great job for us, and we're super proud of the group. So I thought, who else should I interview on my first interview of 2021? Sean-Reed McGee. I hope you enjoy listening to what he has to say as much as I enjoyed interviewing him. Sean-Reed McGee. All right. Hello, everybody. It's Rob Seaver, Executive Director with Leeds Council. I'm bringing you January 2021 first on-air podcast, and I'm super excited about this one. I'm bringing somebody that I didn't really know existed up until a few months ago when we created this task force, which now is a subcommittee. We'll talk about that, but this is Sean-Reed McGee. Sean-Reed is President and Chief Revenue Officer at Back to Learn, Inc. He's also part of the management side of Blacks in Legion. We're going to get into that. Sean-Reed, thank you for taking the time today. This is exciting for me, and I hope that we have a lot of fun today, and we're going to tackle some very good things. Can you, Sean-Reed, tell us real quickly a little bit about you, a little bit about the company that you work for and run, and a little bit about Blacks in Legion so that we can go ahead and take that as context?
Well, thank you so much for the intro. I love it. It's a nice early morning for you. Appreciate you waking up. Again, my history, wow. Well, it all started when I was this knee-high. No, the fact is that, I'm originally a New Yorker and always a New Yorker, now living in the Maryland area. Went to Wagner College, decided one day to sit back and apply for this small job called College Bound. And it became College Bound was a small black and white publication that generated magazines that delivered to high school students. Sat back and said, okay, fine, you know what, love education, love sales. Started working there in the month of April in '95. From that point on, College Bound grew up to become the College Bound Network. We did outdoor, TV, radio, across the board, all within Legion, back, I guess, old school Legion. And then, of course, the birth of the internet came. We were one of the first I was working with, and again, Luciano Ramaroni and Sarah Fiederholtz, they decided to give this young guy a chance. And from that point on, we just started exploding. We decided to leave print magazine advertising, where we were, of course, distributing, I think, probably about 250,000 magazines into different high schools all around the country, coming out 3, then 5 times a year in the top markets. And then, of course, with the internet, we just loved it. Ironically, one of the coolest stories is that the guys from University of Phoenix decided to call. I'm the sales guy, and they called me. And they sat back and pitched me on the fact of, we'd like to do some CPL advertising with you, which was cost per lead. And I said to myself, well, you want guaranteed result advertising? And I laughed them off, and pretty much no. And then luckily, when they called back, they called and got in contact with, I think it was Luch or someone else. And they said, we really want you to consider this. And we did, and that changed our lives. Of course, we became one of the biggest partners with University of Phoenix. And then the list went on, went to develop Classes USA, which was brought out of Succeed magazine, one thing to another, brought in some big hitters like Jordan Keltz, and just the list went on and on. Then we ended up selling that. And again, the good thing is that as much as I was an employee, I was always an independent contractor, which allowed me to sit back and get involved in so many other things within the community, which I loved. Across the board, I'm very, very tight and very close with my fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Again, staying active there and just making sure that I was able to feed into my community and friends and family across the board. And so Legion has been a part of my life for probably the last 27, 28 years. It's the only thing that I've done longer than I've been married, and across the board. And of course, my wife, who's sitting in the other room, she's my governor. Again, I feel like I've always been one of those guys who loves to run, 100 miles per hour. And you have a governor in a car that kind of pulls you back. That's her. That's her. So,
I think we all need them, right?
they come in handy by far. But when you want to run 200 miles per hour and you're like, come on, come on, and then you realize that she pulled you back to 100, and then you see an accident up ahead, you're like, oh, that really was helpful. I'm glad you did that. So, yeah, so the appreciation comes after the fact. Then I think that after, again, after, college bound, again, sat back and left college bound about 5 years ago, decided to do my own thing. And then from that point on, was just more the fact that the world was so open. We had sat back and we had successfully went through an accident of a company, had sat back and sold one or two companies as well, and said to myself, what do I want to do? What is next in this lead gen space and performance marketing? Decided to get involved in everything. It's funny, I actually created a business card, and I had somebody on my team create a business card with every single company that I was a part of, and that I had ownership of, and I think there was a total of 8. We did it in a semicircle, and I listed all the little logos, and I spent probably about a week creating the card. So that was the only thing I did like the whole week, and all these companies, and I said back and said, eventually I've got to narrow this down. You can't be, in essence, a master of all these things. You're going to be a jack, if you're lucky, of these 8. So now we sat back and was able to kind of hone it down, and of course came up with Back to Learn. And so we've had that company in its new element for the last 2 years or so. Again, which is actually underneath the actual holding company of Lead Venture. I've actually just recently teamed up with Chad Williamson to become the COO of Fluent Education Network. So excited about that because that's more of an OPM. So I've got the lead gen space, I've got the OPM, and then of course I also do lead gen for groceries, which is growchoice.com. So still multitasking. So I've got the 3, no longer the 8, but I can sit back and I can hone in on that. And I think because I just love what I do, it's become a no-brainer. Again, I love the fact that again I'm the guy who will text you at 5 in the morning and or be at midnight and sit back and wait for a response. And my wife tells me, Sean, stop. Not everybody is crazy like you.
I used to answer those texts, and I will tell you now in my 50s, the phone gets turned upside down so that I don't see the light, because I still, if I saw the light, I would definitely reply. But I not learned now. Sleep is a precious thing at 53. You know what I'm saying?
You know what? And again, as I'm getting a little, I'm catching up to you. I feel like, and so I'm trying to be easy with it. So now what I'll do is I'll create the text or the emails. I just won't send until it's a reasonable hour so that I can be a little bit more considerate. I'm trying.
I'm telling you right off the bat, just don't be disappointed with a text to me at 3 o'clock in the morning. Although I have answered them because insomnia is also part of, I think, my life at times. But that's just the brain that won't shut down at times. So, I mean, first of all, it always amazes me when I talk to a leader of any organization. I typically and almost usually find that they're not connected to just one spoke of their wheel. They have a full tire full of spokes that they're doing, this, and this, which I think clearly differentiates leaders from people who aren't. And it's not a bad or a good thing to be a leader or not a leader or a follower, but there clearly are things that differentiate leaders and people who achieve versus other people who like to follow and like to be part of something that somebody else created. And just listening to your story, I do get a little bit worn out knowing that, hey, I don't know how that would actually work in my world right now. But I do appreciate when I see somebody come along, maybe in my 20s and 30s, I would have been that active and maybe were, I don't know. I felt like this was important, and I really wanted to do this last year because there were some topical things that were going on in America. And obviously, I think that I'd like to say it started off with George Floyd, but really, I think that you could clearly tell me a story where it didn't start there. but maybe that's where I was awoken, or whatever you want to call it. And I just felt like, okay, maybe enough is enough. Now, part of that was media was flooding the channels with the reaction of not only Minneapolis, but the reaction of the world, which was amazing to see. Social media is at a point, I reflected back on the Rodney King incident, because I was old enough and aware of what was going on nationally at the time of Rodney King. And there were videos of that incident at the time, and then subsequently the news had videos of the violence and the protest and the reaction, at least in LA at the time. And I remember that there was a moment where we had an opportunity to address it in a meaningful way. There were certain things that came out of it, but clearly we didn't fix a problem. We didn't spend enough time addressing the problem. And so therefore, here we are in 2020. And that was probably what, 92, 94, 90, somewhere 93, 4, maybe 92, somewhere around in there, I think. And here we are in 2020 and now 2021, and we're seeing this now on a regular basis. We're seeing things daily, monthly, weekly. And what I can say is that I had to look at what I was doing internally. Mm-hmm. And I was looking at what the council that I was in charge of was doing internally. And then I had to look even deeper at what our industry was doing internally. And what was very clear, especially if you looked around at just the closest thing to me that I could take from, which was our board of directors, we only had one Black individual on our board of directors. Still today, we only have one Black individual on our board of directors, and that's Matt Tillman, who's president of Rate Marketplace. And so it was weighing heavily on me. And I thought, after weeks and weeks and weeks of seeing this, I had to say something. I had to do something. Rob Seaver, not Rob Seaver, executive director, but Rob Seaver, the 53-year-old who probably has never raised their hand and said anything of this. And so I wrote a little paragraph or two for our weekly newsletter at the time, and I stressed over it. I wrote it, rewrote it, erased it, rewrote it, read it, shared it with some friends, admittedly at the time, mostly all white friends that I shared it with, who thought it was tremendous and said a really powerful statement. And I published it. And then I started getting comments, and the comments were like, great, thank you for this. I think it was well, spoken. I think it was well needed. And then I got one comment, and the one comment derailed me. And the one comment was, if you don't think I don't know what you're doing, you're mistaken. You said all of this nice thing. You said all lives matter, which at the time I realized may not have been the right choice of words. But then he said, you followed up the next paragraph with getting back to our roots. We're going to have a webinar next week for regulatory and compliance. In my mind, I thought we had not had a regulatory and compliance webinar for weeks, and we're a regulatory and compliance organization. So in my mind, I looked at where could I write a line that said, getting back to what we do, and I said, getting back to our roots, not thinking that it was following a paragraph about diversity. And I struggled with that one comment for a while. And so I reached out to Matt Tillman, and he and I talked, and I remember having tears in my eyes for much of that conversation, much of it. And I remember Matt telling me a couple of things that stuck with me. One, every word matters. Every line that you write matters. Everything that you say matters. And it's the only thing that people usually measure you by. So you always have to be careful about the words that escape your mouth. That resonated with me. But then he went on to tell me a story about his life and how he grew up. And we're going to have that story on it someday, at some time. But it hit me literally like a ton of bricks to where we had to do something that we weren't currently doing. And that's the genesis of our diversity, equity, and inclusion subcommittee. We had our first meeting. We had a call to action of people who would like to join. Would they please join? And that's when I met you. It was the first call that we had. And I remember you coming on with this energy and this life about you and this enthusiasm and almost an air of excitement. And I still at the time probably didn't recognize the impact that it would have on my life, and still probably don't recognize it fully. But at that moment, I felt finally like, okay, I'm actually doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And I still feel every day I wake up and I challenge myself to do something different. I always challenge myself to think differently. I always challenge myself to do things differently. And being involved with our DE&I subcommittee, but also getting to know people like you has really changed my life and been, I would think, formative in a period of my life where you don't think that you're going to be forming new things.
Yeah.
The reason why I told that story was that I think it's important for us in the rest of this to really talk about some of the things that might be uncomfortable, to bring up some of the things that you're doing so that people can help, so you can help people understand how they can also get involved, but talk about things and help us help our audience and our members and those that could watch this understand how they can make a difference today and tomorrow and those days following, but also how can we reboot? How can we reset? How can we not focus on the back, take it as a learning lesson so that we can always keep it side back here to where we don't repeat it, but also go forward and do something meaningful. And that's what I'd like to talk about. So, before I continue to take your time up, I'd like to hear your reaction to that, because I don't think I've ever told you all of that, and I don't know that you knew that.
I did not know it. Thank you for sharing. By far, I can tell that it hit you emotionally then as well as it does now. What I want to focus on, and again, let me unpack some of that stuff that you just mentioned. I'm trying to figure out where I was going to start.
It's a lot, and you know what? I don't think that we have to go any direction, but I just threw it out there so that our talking points can go wherever you'd like them from now.
No. So, and I think I have a good point where I want to start. You mentioned as far goes everybody from the George Floyd to even Rodney King. I want to go back a little bit further. I'm going to go to, again, Emmett Till. You talk about the fact that Emmett's mom back, and I think this was maybe in the 60s or so. Here was a young man who was, again, big in stature, but he was still only maybe 14, 15 years old. Not sure of his exact age. From the northern areas, northern states, went down to visit some family in the southern states. Apparently, this young lady said that he looked at her, one thing led to another, chased down. He was beaten and burnt and everything else. And Emmett's mother decided that when they actually had the casket, she decided that, you know what, I'm not going to close the casket. I want everybody to see exactly what they did to my son. For no reason under the sun should this ever happen. And what that did was that shocked the world. That shocked society. People sat back and said, you can no longer say that this doesn't happen. See, it's different to have it when you have it where there's young people, older people who pass away or get killed. You know what? We can kind of wipe that off. But when you see that image of somebody took my baby boy or my son, my daughter, whatever it is, and they did this to this person, what did he do? Was the question. And he looked at somebody, or nothing that he could have done would have ever excused what happened to him. And so that shock is something that we went through when we saw, again, the George Floyd. Again, the shock. So those moments of shock is what we really want to stop. So when you talk about Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter, it's almost like if you have several children, If you have it where you have one child that needs help and another child that does not need help, who do you focus on, honestly? You're going to focus on the child that needs the help. So there's no reason to ever say all lives matter. We know that. We focus on the fact that your child, the child that needs the assistance, the child that you're going to sit back and let's say right now we're in the middle of a pandemic and you have it where there's certain children who are taking to studying from home and doing the homeschooling. There's other children who are having a little bit more of a challenge. Guess who those parents are spending time with? The child that needs the assistance. So with that in mind, we have to almost remind everybody that yes, Black Lives Matter and spend time focusing on the lives that have been in essence discarded for so many years and have been pushed under the rug, and that we actually have a society that sits back and says, yes, we love you, but we're not sure. Again, focus on those who need your assistance. And so even when you talk about those particular marches, which are not riots, they're marches saying, guess what? Just equality. We're not asking for you to elevate us over you. We're not asking you for that we would take over. We want to have it where, guess what? We just want to be equals. If you allow us to be equals, get a fair share so that when doors are open, just like the door might be open for you, the doors are open for us as well. The same width. We don't have to always fight and squeeze our way in, becomes a challenge. And so that becomes the heartache. So we're hoping that we can eliminate all of these shocking images in the future. So you asked about what can we learn? Guess what? I want to have it where we become disgusted and disheartened by seeing these images of somebody having it where an officer can put their knee on somebody's neck for over 8 minutes and care nothing about it. And then the person dies, and we sit back and during the pandemic is one of the worst things and probably one of the best things that ever happened. And I know that people might look at me and say, Sean, how could you say that? Guess what? It allowed the majority of American society to sit back and you had a captive audience now. Nobody could go to work. Everybody was sitting home. They were in front of a computer or in front of a TV trying to figure out what was next during this pandemic. And here it is. You had a young man who, again, regardless of what they did not justify having it where his life got choked out of him. Again, handcuff him, put him in the back of a car, one thing, but for you to sit back and say, you know what, I'm just going to sit back and I'm going to choke you out. And you know what, it resonated with people. People became, infuriated. People were shocked again. How could this happen? And I think some people were able to personalize it and say, oh my God, I can't believe that happens. Well, guess what? And the whole country at one time was able to focus solely on that. And that right there was, in essence, for me, it was an incredibly intense time because I sat back and I could personalize with it and said, guess what? To many people who know me, they will sit back and say, oh, you know what, that's Sean. But for those individuals who don't know me, and if I was traveling and an officer who did not look like me decided that, you know what, hey, you were speeding, or you this, or whatever the case is, and they decided to choke my life out. Again, and I think the people who loved me sat back and said, you know what, that could be my friend Sean, or whatever the case is. So to me, I'm hoping that our society has become a lot more open to have it where now, even though some of your best friends might not be people of color, might not look, all your friends look exactly like you, per se. I'm hoping that you sit back and start saying, okay, you know what? Let me expand my world. And not saying that everybody's going to look, you're going to sit back and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go down to, Flatbush, Brooklyn, and hey, I'm here. However, I think the fact is being exposed to different cultures and different things, it works out well. In fact, they say some of the companies that thrive the most are those that are that much more diverse. Again, across the board, because you're sitting back, and unless you want to sit back and only reach individuals who look like you, then you're fine. But if you want to reach the masses, you know what, then do things differently. Go outside of your comfort zone a little bit. Just like I've always done that. And you talk about the fact that being at LeadsCon, loved LeadsCon, meeting up with Jay and everybody else there. I've always had fun, but I recognize that in the education sector of Lead Gen, to a large degree, I believe I was always the only African American that would float through all of those conferences from 2007 or whenever it started. And I think I only missed maybe one or two LeadsCon, rather East or West. And the majority of the leadership, no one looked like me. Again, I think there might have been one. And in fact, I just was introduced, Sean Fallon, actually, again, great guy, double positive, now at a Bovo 42, sat back and introduced me to Matt probably about a year and a half ago at LeadsCon Boston. And it's a shame because even though Matt is in mortgage and I'm in and I'm in education, it's the first time I think I may have seen him from a distance amongst the crowd. And now, again, we sit back and we are, chit-chatting and texting left and right, and it's great. And then meeting, Chad, again, has been great as well. But now you're talking about, we've actually created an organization called Blacks in Lead Gen. And I think we started off, we had probably about maybe about 60 people in our LinkedIn group, which is growing, and looking for everybody to help join. Anybody who wants to help make a difference, does not matter your ethnicity, where you're from. If you're part of lead gen or performance marketing, you just want to make a difference, feel free to join us again on LinkedIn. But what's ironic is the fact is that there are only probably about 5 or 6 African American men, maybe about 4 to 5 African American women, and everybody else, again, that's it. And I feel like, and I'm tapped out. We actually do these profiles on Fridays where I try to sit back and I try to highlight in a clip individuals of color based on their positioning and what they're doing, what their history might be. And after the 8th or 9th one, I ran out. I ran out of content. And I know that there's many more of us out here, but why, why can't we find them? Or even worse is the fact is to find out that there truly are no other individuals of color within our industry. Why is that the case? Are we that closed? Is the door not open to others? Do we not present ourselves likable or that people would want to come? Because again, to me, I believe that our industry is a hidden jewel. We have a blast. I mean, I've had some of the best relationships through all of my partnerships and people that I've worked with, especially the college bound days, the Marios, the Joes, the Luchas. Again, I love it. Again, the history goes on, and I speak and work with individuals, Suzanne and Gina, I mean, constantly. I mean, probably every 3 months I have something new for them. Oh, can you help me with this? Can we do this? Can we do that? And again, I think a lot of them are Italian. They adapted me into the Italian culture. So again, I've eaten very well. And they've taken extremely good care of me. Again, but I would love to know why is it that we don't have more individuals of color? And so I'm hoping that Blacks in Lead Gen as a group, that we're able to sit back and get other individuals who are CEOs and in positions of power and authority at their companies, that they not only will they join, but also what they'll do is they'll invite individuals throughout their company lines, from the top to the bottom, from the reps to the managers to the directors, whoever they might be, who want to sit back and make a difference on the culture of their company. Again,
I think it's interesting. You talk about the fact that it's obvious. I mean, once again, like on our board of director page, just scan the page, and I think what you were just talking about is just another proof point of evidence of where the industry is right now as it relates to diversity. But you and I yesterday, when we were talking about doing this, we talked about a singular word that I want to bring up and I want to address, because fear, I believe, factors into this at some level. You and I talked about that one particular word, and fear, I think, in just its singular form, if you looked it up in Webster, would probably find a definition that may or may not suit exactly what I'm talking about. But the fear could stem from a lot of things. And you talked about, what types of fear you believe people may have. And some of it was fear of just unknown, which stifles a lot of things. It actually stops a lot of things before you ever get to start on something, because of the fear of failing or fear of even succeeding at times. But then there's the fear of possibly losing something that you currently have, fear that might be, there's a physical danger that's involved with, opening yourself up to something. There's a lot of that. And do you believe that, one, that's true, that fear does motivate some of that? And two, do you believe that there are ways that we could overcome that are easier than maybe I could be sitting here thinking on my own?
I do. Well, let me answer both of those questions. You have it where, let me give you an example. My daughters. My daughters, again, I have three beautiful young ladies. Again, they take great care of me. Again, they're a little bit older now, 26, 22, and 20. And again, love every bit of it. But one of the things that I always grew up telling them about the fact is, please don't walk around like you hit a triple when you were born on third base. And so let me repeat that. Don't walk around like you hit a triple, like you did all the work when you were born on third base. And what that means to, and again, if we take that to regular societies, the fact is that there are people who live in an elite lifestyle. They live in a culture that has been based around them and to meet their particular needs. But yet they've done nothing to, in essence, deserve that. Again, so to sit back and to want to keep other people from being able to have the same abilities to be able to get to where they are by shutting them down, saying, okay, fine, no, it's kind of like the crabs in the barrel. I'm going to continue to push you down because I've gotten here. I don't want you here. Instead of, canceling that fear out with another four-letter word, which is love. And the Bible talks about the fact that, again, love will, can sit back and is the most powerful of all those particular things. Fear, again, if I sit back and I think about the CEOs of many of the companies that I engage with all the time, you talk about the fact these are individuals who had to sit back and push fear to the side. In fact, they sat back and they jumped into the deep end of the pool, sat back and said, you know what, if it's a new piece of technology, if it's a new way of doing something, if it is the fact of saying, you know what, I'm going to go talk to the biggest and baddest company and I'm going to get them as a client, guess what? You had to push fear to the side and show them that you actually had a product and a company that was worthy of their particular business across the board. So you were able to cancel out your fear, internal fear, for understanding that there was a brighter light on the other side. So with that in mind, again, that fact is that love, I'm hoping that will drive people to sit back and say, you know what, let me see how it might be for this other person. What if we did this? And embrace it, opposed to pushing people away. But yes, if you feel like, you know what, if you want to do a excuse my language, a half-ass job, and you know that you can stay there because of your privilege, because you were born into a situation or you were placed in a situation because everybody who hired you looks like you, but knowing that there's an individual who does not look like you that is so much more qualified, and you're concerned that your inability to really do the job is going to come out because if anybody ever found out about that individual, that you would be done, then guess what? That becomes your reality.
I will tell you on fear also, and I think that, being able to tap into our DE&I subcommittee monthly as we have those calls, and being able to talk openly, because we are in a world of cancel culture, which we talked about at some point, where you're not given a lot of opportunity to fall or make a mistake in today's world. It's because of social media, because of just the inability, I think, at times to make mistakes. Fear also could be, and I'll give you a first world or first hand example of what I'm talking about. Martin Luther King was this week, which unfortunately dates this podcast now to a particular event. But I remember when I reached out to you, you said, Happy Martin Luther King Day. Now, what struck me about that, and I don't know if you knew this or not, probably didn't, was I've never said Happy Martin Luther King Day in my life. I've seen Martin Luther King Day represented many, many times, but I have never particular said that to another individual for probably a million different reasons. But you have no idea, by reading that in your email, it opened me up to a different thought process. So you may not have known that you actually triggered something in me that would be lifelong, but just in those words, it was something that was different. But having said that, Matt Tillman reached out and he said, "Hey, Rob, are we going out with anything today for the council as it relates to Martin Luther King Day?" And we were. I have a marketing plan that has every major holiday covered with something. It's typically a meme type thing with an image and a Leeds Council logo and something related to the holiday. But this in particular holiday was a challenge for me, and a challenge for many reasons, but I articulated this on one of the previous DE&I subcommittee calls. And I even stoked that fear even further by an article that I read that be careful what quotes you use of Martin Luther King because it's likely it may not be the original quote. And it was talking about how in not just even Martin Luther King, but other people of historic value as they say things. You know, we say words, actions speak louder than words. That's not the original quote, and so it over time has evolved and morphed to fit probably a much easier culture of saying something versus the long quote that was originally said. But when I sat down to talk about, you know, how I'm going to articulate Martin Luther King Day on behalf of the council, I almost was paralyzed, as I have been many times in the past, trying to articulate anything about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because one, I'm not Black, and two, I don't have the perspective and experience behind me to know, one, is that an actual statement that he said, and two, is that the message that the council won and I need to be saying on behalf. So I sat, and much like I did on those first two paragraphs in that newsletter that I sent last year, I was paralyzed with fear that I would get it wrong.
No.
Because today's culture of cancel doesn't allow me to make a mistake any longer. How can somebody like myself, and just so you know, I called up a couple of CMOs that I have mad respect for who run large organizations and their marketing. They struggle with the same thing. Is this the right message? Is this the right image? Is this going to be interpreted much like my getting back to the roots of the organization was interpreted a certain way by an individual that had an impact on them in a negative way? How do I continue to advance? How do I continue to be better? How do I continue to grow and be allowed to make mistakes, but not have that fear that I'm going to be immediately canceled for that mistake?
Understood. Again, we're in a world where, and
you didn't know this podcast was going to be more about me than you, did you?
No. And I love it. I love it because you know what? The majority of this country still looks more like you than me. And so at the end of the day, the fact is that I want to be able to speak to that as much as possible. To answer your question, I think the fact is that there some sensitivity out there? The answer is yes. The fact is that everybody's been touched a little bit differently based off of particular words and actions in their lives. Again, right now, people's upbringing. We talked about how you were born in Florida and, you know, again, trailer, you know, this and that. And me, I'm talking about, you know, I'm a Long Island, New York guy, and I'm talking more about the projects and all this other stuff. So guess what? It is what it is. That's fine. But the fact is, so understand that some people are always going to be sensitive. Can you make everybody happy? The answer is no. You can never make 100% of the people happy. However, the fact is that if you do something in love and with sensitivity, and if you get it wrong, guess what? I believe that individuals who do it in love, in sensitivity, the fact is that you should be giving grace. And I think that the majority of individuals will always give you grace. Again, so if you meant well, guess what? They're gonna give it back to you, and they might sit back and say, hey, you might want to rephrase it this way. Okay, thank you. And don't be sensitive to, oh my God, you know what? I got to get this perfect. No, the fact is, you know what? I think that so often we sit back and individuals who are white or who are not maybe of you know, color sit back and they wait on somebody else to step in to make the difference. And right now, in doing this pandemic, we got to a point where everybody became sensitive to the fact of what was happening with George Floyd and, again, Breonna Taylor. I mean, everybody sat back and said, enough's enough. And they got to a point where I was down there and, I'm in Maryland, but I'm right outside of DC. I'm out there, Black Lives Matter Plaza, and I'm out there and I'm loving it. And the reason why I fell in love with just the whole block and what the mayor had done is that when I sat back and I saw it, the majority of people who were actually out there marching did not look like me. And I said to myself, out of all these years, I have never seen so many allies to the cause of equality. Again, sit back and say, guess what? We don't want it to be better. We just want it to be equal. We want to have it where, guess what? Understand that some of the rules of this game that we play in our world here are set up against us. So with that in mind, can we change the rules? And so now again, we're talking about, even though we didn't do this, podcast on, MLK Day per se, but we actually started it on Inauguration Day. Inauguration where you actually had Bill, we actually had, Joe Biden and, Kamala Harris, the first female African American member of AKA, again, sit back, and now she has the second most powerful position in this world. She's the most powerful influencer on the planet. Again, wow. So we've come a long way. However, are we there yet? The answer is no, because there's too many individuals who on January 6th showed you that regardless of the results of an election and what happens, that they want to go out there and they want to storm and beat with the American flag, beat on soldiers and police officers. Tell me, at what point did that make sense? That you were going to go and storm? So I would like to always do things with the end in mind. So your goal here was you were going to go in, you were going to storm the Capitol, you were going to get the congressmen and the senators that you did not like. One of them, which of course it was the former Vice President Pence, and you were going to do what with them? What were you going to do? So you sat back and you marched and you wanted to make it what? What? I mean, you couldn't prove that it was, again, it was never proven, again, that it was actually stolen. Don't be a sore loser. At the end of the day, the fact is we don't always get what we want. But at the end of the day, the fact is that there needs to be change, and it has been changed. But we still have to have it where I'm hoping that we don't have to continue to have our system shocked by an Emmett Till or George Floyd or whoever it might be, to have it where, oh my God, I'm enraged again. Remember, these things have been happening for over 400 years.
Yeah. We have enough example. We don't need more evidence or history or historical value to know what to do.
Exactly. So to your point, you do not have to get it perfect. I would sit back and guess what? If I wanted to write something that it affected Italians or affected Jews, and I wanted to sit back and I wanted to say something, guess what? I'm going to call one of my associates or friends and ask them a quick question. Not a problem. If they're my friend, they're going to sit back and they're going to tell me. They're not going to be insulted. Say, hey, you know what? I got a quick question for you. I'm writing this. What do you think? Oh, Sean, you know what? I like it. Oh, Sean, why don't you change this? Thank you. Got you. Go to print. It's that simple.
Yeah, I think that clearly was what went through my mind after I pushed, send, was I have this subcommittee that you're a part of, and I want to talk about that a little bit because it is something very different than we had originally started off as part of our mission with the council to engage with. I felt at the time a little bit like it was gratuitously knee-jerk or reactionary. So at the beginning, I felt a bit guilty of, oh, are we just, because one of the things I didn't want to do, because at the time you saw all of these companies just clamoring to the stage to say how they're supportive of this or that. And many of those companies did get it wrong. And many of those companies even paid some of the price for getting it wrong because it just didn't have any authenticity to it. And so it was important to me, if we were going to do this, and I talked to Matt Tillman about this, it needed authenticity. It needed an organic flavor or flair to it. It needed something to where when we get going, we're not going to in 6 months look back and go, Why aren't we doing this any longer? Well, we just kind of gave up on it somewhere along the way. I need to, in my mind, feel like this is so important to the integral mission of Leads Council that we wake up, and when we think of our mission of advocating and lobbying and educating and all of those things that we started or founded this organization on, that diversity, equity, inclusion are parallel to those thoughts when we think about our core, right? And so I feel like just like any effort along the way, we could have been stronger on this point. We could have done more on that point. But I also am very happy that every time we turn on the Zoom channel to join monthly, we see fresh faces, we see shining, smiling faces. We have conversations that are meaningful. This last one, yeah, I can't remember the gentleman's name. I was sitting here thinking I'm going to bring him up, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he has Guardhouse. Remember, and that was, to me, that was what embodies what I'd like to see more on our calls. And it was amazing what he was doing. And hopefully you're looking his name up very quickly. But because I do want to give him credit, since I think it's very appropriate to try to do so here. But what an amazing story, right? It was an amazing story. And I felt like that is why we formed our diversity, equity, and inclusion subcommittee. I'd like to see more people join. I'd like to see more people. Jonathan Gardner, right? I remember now. I knew that. But I'd like to see more people join. I'd like to see more Jonathan Gardners come to the table and tell us what they're doing so that we can share their story. And I'd like to see more people of color join as well. And one of the things I'd like to do is get across here is that I'd like you to talk to, CEOs and decision makers within these companies and ask their help about identifying existing people within their organization and looking to a point of what they could do in their own organizations that they might not currently be doing, that could give them some ideas and suggestions to help be more inclusive, to help put DE&I objectives and initiatives to the forefront. I don't know that a lot of people know what they could be doing at this point that may not be just re-engineering their entire organization, once again, maybe stoked by fear.
You know what? And to that point, the fact is, I think is something's interesting to sit back and say, if not you, then who? So when I sit back and I think of individuals of authority and who can actually make a difference and can actually join the committee, along with actually assign other people the ability and the hours needed to join our committee, it's important. The fact is, if not them, then who? Who are you waiting on? Why do we sit back and so often we wait for somebody else to act? We wait for somebody else to sit back and then we respond after they do it. And we just try to mirror that, opposed to being willing to face that particular fear with love, understanding that, you know what, if you don't get it right 100%, it's going to be okay, because people will understand your true intent. And in months and years down the line, when you still have it where within the top 5 to 10 things of your company is to make sure that you have diversity, equality, and inclusion included within, in essence, the culture of your business, then we'll know if this was just the shock and awe of the George Floyd and the pandemic and everybody's giving, so you got to give. You created a committee and then the committee died. You stopped giving money, one thing to another. Then we'll know that it was not true and was not truly sincere. But when you're able to maintain it, it becomes a part of that blood lifestyle of what your company is and the part of the culture, then that's great. When do you stop? When do you stop? Is when, as you mentioned this, Rob, is when it becomes equal. When you sit back and say, wow, guess what? Everybody has equal opportunity. Again, I look at my overall business, and my business actually reflects my customers across the board. It reflects the fact of the culture of America, or of the world per se, who they've been looking to service. Then guess what? We have arrived. We have arrived. Until that happens, then guess what? We keep on going strong. And it's very similar. And I'm going to compare this. And again, do note, I lost my brother who I to cancer, for a very rare form of cancer. Excuse me. When he was 33. We were both the same age, 33. And with that in mind, so I hate, and I say this with all my heart, I hate cancer by far. And I've given a lot of money and a lot of time and effort and energy, and to, sat on several boards with American Cancer Society. I hate cancer. And at one point, I used to sit back and say, guess what? If people are not willing to give to a particular institution that is looking to run tests and find the cure for cancer, then guess what? When we get the cure, you're not going to be privy to it. And I was like, Sean, you can't do that. You can't do that. You know what? Again, so with that in mind, I ask everybody to sit back and say, just like we would sit back, and so often you don't give to something until you're affected by it. I understand individuals, Rock, who might look like you, might not sit back, and there's some people out there who are not you, of course, who sit back and say, guess what? Black Lives Matter, or, equality. I'm good. I'm in a good place. My family's fed well. We're living high on the hill. Guess what? I'm not affected. This is not me. Guess what? Think outside of yourself. And in fact, a young lady, again, her name is Amanda Gorman, who actually sat back and did the poem for Joe Biden just yesterday.
Oof,
I mean, 22
right.
years old, she blew my mind. And
Everybody, the nation.
Yeah, so she talked in a poem, she talked about the legacy of love and be a part of that. And leaving that legacy of love, don't be the legacy of ignorance. Don't leave a legacy of put my head in the sand and act like it doesn't exist. And even though you might not be blatantly going out there and saying, guess what, I'm going to make sure that things are not equal, guess what? You might have to find a way that you're going to have to cater to the individuals who don't look like you so that you can bring them up, because for so many years, they thought the door to maybe this industry of lead gen and performance marketing was not open to them. Because when they opened the door and they looked in, they didn't see anybody. Maybe they didn't see me or Matt or Chad or a couple of us in the corners. They looked in, they saw a sea of individuals who looked nothing like them. And maybe there was even no one, maybe very few women as well. They closed the door and went someplace else. Mm-hmm. And guess what? And they could be the brilliant talent that we need to take us to the next level. So guess what? Open the door, and guess what? Be the person who's sitting back and saying, come on in. Open the door and even invite them in by far. And then also Amanda, in her poem, she had wrote down, she read this part that said, in essence, something to the nature of be brave enough to see the light, and then be brave enough to be the light. And I read through that a couple of times and I said to myself, wow, stop waiting for other people. Again, you can be the light. You see it, be it. And then guess what? And you'll be given the grace to be able to make mistakes and stumble a little bit. No one is perfect. Again, the first person who wants to throw the stone, make sure that you're perfect. And if you're not, because you're not, you'll be fine. Again, so I'm hoping that individuals will sit back and join Blacks in Lead Gen. And yes, we made the name just that way because we wanted it to be bold and audacious. We wanted to sit back and we wanted it to kind of hit people in the face so that we can become this organization that actually has it where we're sitting back and we're trying to rise everybody up. Don't be fearful. It's in love and it's a safe place. We actually have a blast. We laugh a lot on those calls, on the Zoom calls, and feel free to be a part of the solution. And don't put your head in.
So they can find how to sign up on the LinkedIn page. What's the best way for them to go and be able to sign up for this?
You hit it right there, right on the LinkedIn page. We also have, again, I think it's called Blacks in Lead Gen on Instagram. So between those two are the most used sources right now to communicate. And then from that point on, we'll go in, we'll invite you in. And again, looking forward to it.
We're running a little bit long, which I can't thank you enough for your time here. But one of the things that you told me was you always were worried about your background, and you made fun of mine. Wasn't really making fun, but you pointed out mine versus yours. But I have to be honest with you. You showed me something yesterday that I thought was really powerful and really important. And I'd like to just, can you angle your camera back up a little bit and show that? And I thought it was really cool. Explain what we're looking at there.
That right there, and I hope that you can see it.
I
That
can
right
see it.
there
Yeah, I can
is
see it.
one of the very first meetings of the founders of my fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And again, I loved it because again, you have it where it was called an experiment in brotherhood. And it was founded in 1906 at Cornell University. We actually had it where there were 7 young Black men, again, of all different societies actually decided to get together, and they were not allowed to be a part of, again, white fraternities. And sat back and said, you know what, we want to start a Black lettered, Greek lettered organization. They called it Alpha by Alpha, but this is talking about one of the first meetings. You have one individual who actually walked out the door who sat back and said, this can't happen. We can't, this is never going to happen. And now we are since 1906, so we are 100 and, oh my gosh, 14 years deep. And again, so we are the first Black lettered Greek organization ever founded. We are strong. We actually just elected a new general vice president. And unlike other fraternities, because again, some people sit back and say, oh, yeah, I was part of a fraternity when I was in college. Our organizations, again, are lifetime. Again, I have been an active member. I came into the organization 27 years ago. I have been active every single one of those 27, have held many positions on a chapter, local level, regional level. Again, we sit back and our goal here is to be able to help society. Again, help those individuals who have less than, again, across the board, and regardless of who they look like. So we actually have a mission, again, of brotherhood, and we are out there in the front lines, again, making sure that, yes, we're marching for equality, and our goal here is to make a difference. I think I told you yesterday, the fact is that I sit back and every day my goal here is to find something, to do something that brings discomfort a little bit, because that takes me outside of my comfort zone. But 2, the fact is I'm constantly working on my dad. I'm born, I'm going to pass away, I'm going to die. What I do here while I'm here on this planet Earth is that dash. What difference can I make? What legacy can I leave? And so, again, my fraternity, which is dear in my heart, and again, I've got it where, again, we've got other, go up there, other ones, yeah, don't go to the bar area, but we've got all kinds of different flags. I love it, and our goal here is to make a difference. So, Rob, before we leave, I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity. This was great. I'm looking forward to being hopefully in your database for a very long time. If you ever have any questions about writing anything and saying Happy MLK Day, feel free to, to allow me to be one of the first ones. And I will definitely advise as when I need your help, without a shadow of a doubt, because I've heard everything from, again, the beard to the camera to all of your technology. I'm taking and stealing all of that for myself, and I will give you credit for it. But by far, I'm going to come to you for help, and I know that you'll be there for me as well as I'll be there for you. So again, one day at a time. And again, thank you so much for everything that you've been doing.
No, I really appreciate those words, and I will probably text you at 2 o'clock in the morning since I know that you take those calls and texts. Sean-Reed, man, look, as just echoing your words back to you, this has been a pleasure, an absolute pleasure. I've wanted to do this. I think you have also for a while. The timing was right. I want to get this out to people, and I want to promote it well, but this has been just a blast getting to know you, and I want to do more. Love to do something on EDU specific, and so I think that we can set that up in the near future. Sean-Reed, thank you very much, and I'll get this out quickly.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate you.